Donald Rumsfeld remains a free man tonight despite an unsuccessful attempt to arrest him in Boston. In our third story on the countdown, the try for a citizen's arrest came from a group called Veterans for Peace. They confronted the former President Bush's Secretary of Defense at a book signing on Monday night.
I'm making a citizen arrest!
I went down front and looked Donald Rumsfeld in the eye and said, I'm making a citizen's arrest.
The man speaking there was Nate Goldschlag, who will join us shortly. He was part of a larger group that gathered at the Old South Meeting House, the site that sparked the actual Tea Party in 1773. Rumsfeld was there to discuss Known and Unknown, a memoir, which New York Times Review called a fast and loose game of dodgeball, tedious and self-serving, filled with efforts to blame others. Despite Rumsfeld's efforts to rewrite history, the facts still blame him and others in the Bush administration for the ongoing carnage that followed the invasion of Iraq. Some of Rumsfeld's supporters disagreed with the protesters.
I fought for this country. Yes! And that man is a war criminal. Yes!
Mr. Goldschlag was one of several removed from the protest, co-sponsored by Code Pink. One man was reportedly arrested for using a bullhorn to assault a police officer. About 300 supporters of Rumsfeld were inside, while the protesters stayed mostly outside. One wore a mask and a costume, suggesting new attire for the man his pals call Rummy. And now, as promised, let's bring in Nate Goldschlag, who served in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam era and is now a board member of Veterans for Peace. Thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
All right, so the old dog follows car, chases car, catches car. What would you have done with Mr. Rumsfeld if you had succeeded in arresting him?
Well, obviously, for a citizen's arrest, the Boston police have to come in and actually make the arrest, and they had nothing to do with that. In fact, they hustled me out.
The use of the term war criminal, it's strong and weighted language. Give me your rationale for using it.
Okay, we believe that Donald Rumsfeld is basically one of the people responsible for the Iraq War. He lied about weapons of mass destruction. He lied about Saddam's links to 9/11. He lied about yellow cake from Niger. He lied about mobile weapons labs, the whole thing. And he got us into a war that has killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, 5,000 Americans. So we view him as a war criminal.
Well, you put it that way, it sounds like it was a pretty convincing argument, and yet the protesters seemed outnumbered by the Rumsfeld supporters. Were you nervous? How were you treated on the whole, do you think?
Well, once I got up, they started shouting at me to get out of there, and as we were hustled out, they were yelling goodbye, goodbye, that kind of thing. But there were 300 people that were gotten by right-wing talk radio in Boston, and it was to what we expected.
Was it instructive at all to be among people who think he's some sort of hero as opposed to the very bad, very ill-prepared, and possibly criminal Secretary of Defense under George Bush?
And was it instructive? No, I thought it was a little bit comical and discouraging that people can actually think that. I think one of the people on the news report said he's one of the finest Americans in history. So I just don't understand how people can think that. I don't think these people are representative of most people in the United States.
But did you see any, I guess what I'm saying is, did you see any sign of thinking? Because it occurs to me that thinking's got nothing to do with it. These are people who probably had undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder after 9/11, or just people who get their rocks off watching us invade countries and kill people who don't deserve either. Did you see any sign that there was somebody who could have presented some sort of intellectual argument against what you were saying?
No, not really. I mean, the guy in front of me in line, I was not dressed like this with this Veterans for Peace T-shirt. I had on, good clothes, and it was kind of incognito. And this guy in front of me was yelling at protesters, "Go back to Cuba, go back to Cuba." Which is, is comical. I mean, these people really are a little bit out there.
Too much listening to local right-wing radio in Boston, which is particularly laughable, like Callahan and Dennis, the old sports writers. You had to pay $50 to get in. Did you get your book autographed at least?
I couldn't stomach taking his book. The book was on the table. You could have taken one, but as it was, I was forced to give him standing ovations and stuff before I stood up. But I didn't take his book. But I'll tell you, Keith, we're going to be down in D.C. next week, October 6th, occupying Freedom Plaza, Veterans for Peace, along with many other groups.
Okay.
And we want you there. We know you've covered the occupation of Wall Street, and we appreciate what you're doing. We want you to come there.
Which date have you picked?
October 6th,
All right.
Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. We're beginning an occupation.
All right, let me see if we can work it out logistically. I doubt it, but let me see. It would be a logistical question and nothing else. Nate Goldschlag, proud American veteran after his attempt to conduct a citizen's arrest on former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. And great thanks for some of your time tonight, sir.
All right, thanks, Keith.